Why do we wear masks? They appear quietly, almost unnoticed. Sometimes in childhood, when someone laughs at our tears. Sometimes in youth, when the sting of first rejection cuts us to fragility. And often in adulthood, when it simply hurts too much to be ourselves. Masks. We do not put them on for the world, but for ourselves. Not to deceive, but to survive. Psychologists say that by the age of 8, a child already understands the need to act differently depending on the situation. This is not just lying, it is adaptation. It is the beginning of learning social roles. The sociologist Irving Goffman once called this the great social drama, where each of us is both actor and audience at the same time. A mask is a way to reduce threat. For the brain, it is a survival strategy. When the limbic system senses the risk of rejection, defense circuits light up. The amygdala, linked with fear, shame, and anxiety, activates. And the brain whispers, hide, pretend, do not show your real self. It is too dangerous. Take the story of James, a 40-year-old man from Pittsburgh. Outwardly, he was charming, always joking, the life of every gathering. People said, what a light-hearted person he is. Yet at home, he would sit in darkness for hours, unable to admit even to himself how lonely he felt. His mask of joy had become armor. Only when panic attacks began did he finally ask, who am I without this role? The brain does not distinguish between physical pain and social pain. Rejection, ridicule, exclusion, all of these activate the same regions as a burn on the skin. When someone hides behind masks like, I am strong, I am successful, I am always fine, often they are only trying to avoid this invisible but very real pain. The illusion of control becomes a trap. Neuropsychologist Bruce Hood showed that the sense of self is not a stable core, but a dynamic construction rebuilt again and again. Our I is not carved from marble, but assembled from memories, habits, and reflections in the eyes of others. Masks are not a distortion. They are part of this construction. But why do they cling to us so tightly? Because they work. In the moment, a mask can save us. It helps us blend in, to be accepted, to belong. The brain records the success. This strategy brings results. Neural pathways strengthen, behavior is reinforced. It is like a well-worn trail, easy to walk, but not always leading where we truly want to go. Mia, a 25-year-old designer from New York, once realized that everything she posted on social media had nothing to do with who she really was. Photos of food, smiles, travels. Inside, she was anxious, sleepless, feeling unknown. Then one day she recorded a story saying, I am tired of pretending. Through tears, she received hundreds of messages of support. That was her first step back to herself. Working with masks is not about ripping them all off at once. That can be dangerous, even destructive, like stepping from darkness into blinding light. Instead, it begins with observation. Notice when the urge to pretend arises. Why? What pain am I trying to avoid? What part of me feels unsafe? The practice of 3 questions, proposed by therapist Byron Katie, can be the first step. Is it true? Can I be absolutely certain it is true? Who am I without this thought? For example, if the thought is, they will reject me if I tell the truth, ask these questions. Often you will discover that fear is not a fact, only an assumption. You can keep a mask journal. Each day, write down which roles you played. Where were you genuine and where convenient? This is not for judgment, only for awareness. The brain is trainable. Neuroplasticity is its greatest gift. We can rewrite old strategies, replace fear with trust, a mask with gentle vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness, but strength that connects. When someone dares to be seen as they truly are, they give permission for others to do the same. And one day you may wake up and realize that there is no need to perform, because who you are is already enough. The actress Sarah Bernhardt once said, "We are born with a mask. All life is a stage, and the audience will not forgive us for a naked face." This metaphor reflects not only social reality, but neurophysiological truth. Our brain, tuned for survival in groups, constantly reads signals of approval or disapproval, adjusting itself to fit in. This ability to mimic social environments was once an evolutionary advantage, yet over time, it can distance us from ourselves. Studies by Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychology, showed that the greater the gap between the real self and the ideal self, the greater the anxiety and tension. We live double lives, smiling outwardly, performing rituals of politeness, while inside we no longer recognize ourselves. This tension of masking is a root of burnout, depression, and emptiness. A psychological experiment at the University of California found that people asked to be authentic for a day felt more energy and less anxiety. In contrast, those who were instructed to be nice ended the day exhausted and emotionally numb. The mask of politeness, unlike sincerity, requires enormous cognitive effort. Neurobiology confirms this, since the brain regions for self-control and impulse suppression work far harder under the weight of inauthenticity. So why do we still choose masks? The answer, strangely, lies in childhood. Psychologist Martin Seligman showed that children who often heard, "Do not be like this," "Do not get angry," "Be convenient," grow up convinced that their true feelings threaten love and acceptance. In that case, the mask is not pretense, but a shield. We wear it not to lie, but to protect. The story of Matteo, a successful top manager at a large company, illustrates this in the most vivid way. As a child, he was a dreamy, sensitive boy, yet his father, a military man, ingrained in him the idea that a real man does not cry. Over the years, he developed toughness, sarcasm, and a commanding leadership style. He was respected, even feared, but at home, in the silence, he felt a void. At one corporate emotional intelligence training, he allowed himself, for the first time, to speak about the loss of his brother, and his voice trembled. After that conversation, colleagues began approaching him with gratitude and respect. For the first time, he realized that vulnerability is not weakness, but a path to genuine connection. Our brain does more than reflect our emotions, it learns from them. Neuroplasticity allows even the most entrenched reactions to be rewritten. One method is the practice of radical honesty with oneself. A simple exercise. Every evening, ask yourself, where did I choose a mask today, and where was I authentic? Without judgment, without analysis, just observe. This act of noticing your own emotions changes perception and activates brain regions associated with self-reflection and empathy. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said that hell is other people, but perhaps hell is ourselves, when for years we play roles that do not belong to us. A mask protects, but it also deprives us of oxygen. It allows us to fit in, but it also makes breathing difficult. A mask we forget to remove becomes an inseparable part of our identity. We no longer distinguish where the role ends and the authentic self begins. At some point, the time comes to choose, continue the performance or risk being oneself, with a trembling voice and awkward pauses, but authentic. And perhaps the most paradoxical thing is that this very authenticity becomes the strongest social bond. We think we will be loved for our mask, but in truth, we can only be loved without it. Sometimes the mask becomes so thin that we forget where pretense ends and the true self begins. We play roles, confident professional, unfeeling parent, cheerful friend, and suddenly realize we cannot step out of these roles, even when alone. American psychologist Philip Zimbardo, known for experiments on the impact of social context on behavior, argued that humans adapt to external expectations faster than they realize. In the famous Stanford prison experiment, participants assigned the role of guards began behaving cruelly within a few days, even though they initially had no such tendencies. This demonstrates how quickly a mask, donned as part of a social role, can change one's internal personality structure. Neurophysiology supports this idea. The brain essentially cannot distinguish imagined from real. Studies using functional MRI show that memory recall, imagination, and real experiences activate nearly identical brain regions. This means that if you constantly play a successful, composed person, even when a storm rages inside, Your brain will adjust your hormonal balance, cognitive processes, and emotional reactions to fit that mask. Soon, it becomes difficult to tell where you end and your illusion begins. But why do we cling so desperately to these masks? Often because we fear rejection. In his book, The Social Animal, psychologist Elliot Aronson notes that the human need to belong to a group is fundamental. It is not merely social whim, but a biologically ingrained function. From ancient times, expulsion from the tribe meant death. A mask is a way to convince society that you belong. And here lies the paradox. We fear being ourselves to be accepted, yet in doing so, we lose precisely what makes us alive. It is as though the key to love and acceptance is sought not within, but in a practiced imitation of happiness. An inspiring example comes from a Japanese cardiac surgeon who, after 30 years at a prestigious clinic, experienced a breakdown during an operation. He realized that for the past 20 years he had been playing the scalpel genius more than living it. His decisions became cautious and mechanical, and he lost the joy of work, yet he continued, afraid to shatter the image. Only after a crisis did he retreat to a mountain village, treating people for free as an ordinary doctor, and for the first time in years felt relief. "I took off the armor, and it turned out that beneath it I am alive," he said. Psychotherapists today understand that the path to healing often begins not with self-knowledge, but with honesty. Honesty about struggling, about being tired, about a role that no longer inspires. In this moment, the brain begins an extraordinary restructuring. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-reflection and long-term planning, activates. Amino acids and hormones linked to the dopamine system restore motivation. Thought patterns, literally neural pathways, start forming anew. And this can be trained. Try a simple exercise. Each evening for a week, alone, ask yourself 3 questions. When was I not myself today? Why? What did I truly feel? No need to correct anything, just observe. This gentle attention already triggers neural rewiring, making connections more flexible. Observation is the first step toward freedom from the mask. It is from observation that the journey toward inner wholeness begins, not from struggle, not from dramatic rejection of roles, but from the silence within, from which an honest voice emerges. I feel, I live, I am different. This honest inner voice is not loud or triumphant. It is more like a faint light in the fog. Easy to miss, especially when life is built around conformity. Family expectations, partner expectations, work culture, the era. Yet it guides us to spaces where masks are unnecessary. The human brain, seeking safety, clings to the familiar, even if it causes suffering. Neuroscience shows that habitual behavior activates the basal ganglia, which govern automatic actions. They love repetition, conserve energy, and ensure survival, but also block access to new strategies, especially if past attempts at sincerity led to pain, mockery, or rejection. In this sense, a mask is not merely social theater, but an evolutionary safeguard. The brain does not distinguish then from now. A child told at the age of 5 that showing emotions is weakness may wear a mask of composure for life, even among loving people. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and context, reinforces these old patterns as the only viable option. The story of a writer-patient documented by psychotherapist Irvin Yalom illustrates this. A man hid his anxiety behind irony and ostentatious intellect for years. Inside, he suffered loneliness but could not reveal it to his wife or friends. When he cried for the first time in a session, not from pain but from allowing himself to be real, he experienced panic attacks. This was not a setback but a transition. The brain, accustomed to the mask, resisted, but after several months, panic and insomnia vanished, and the writer created again without fear of being truly seen. Such a path demands courage. Not heroic, but quiet courage. The courage to remain in the moment when the mask slips, revealing confusion, shame, and vulnerability. Psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk writes that trauma is not what happened to us, but how we learn to hide our feelings from it. The more masks we wear, the deeper the tension in the body, the quieter the voice of the soul. Modern somatic psychology confirms that people accustomed to holding it together live in constant muscular tension, raising cortisol levels, exhausting the nervous system, and making a person irritable or apathetic. The mask of outward calm creates an inner storm. Removing it is not only an act of freedom, but an act of restoring health. One approach is body awareness practice. For example, in the morning before leaving the house, ask yourself, which emotions will I hide today, and where do I feel them in my body? Observing the body, breath, tension, pulse, can reveal more truth than reflection because the body never lies. Philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote that humans rarely live, but fill the space between birth and death with a masquerade. Harsh as it sounds, his words challenge us not to discard the mask instantly, but to notice where we are alive and where we merely function. This is where true awakening begins. When one allows oneself not to know who they are without the mask, it is like losing a compass. Anxiety and doubt arise, whispering, "What if no one needs me if I stop being convenient?" Yet this voice is the first sign that you are approaching your authentic self. A real-life example: a successful 40-year-old TV host decided to disappear from media for a year. She could no longer manage the image of a confident, brilliant, always positive star. During the year, she recorded a daily video diary, admitting out loud her fears, without makeup, scripts, or filters. These videos were never published. After a year, she returned with a new voice, a different gaze, a deep, captivating inner silence. "Now," she said, "I can not only speak, but hear myself." We do not need to make vulnerability a spectacle. It is intimate. But the more we consent to live in genuine contact with our feelings, the less need there is for masks. People sense it. Authenticity is contagious. It breaks down others' walls by example, not aggression. Psychologist Carl Rogers believed that the most healing aspect of therapy is not the method but the atmosphere of authenticity. A person changes not because they are taught, but because someone near them is unafraid to be real. In daily life, we can create such an atmosphere even without words, simply by observing our emotions, without demanding strength, joy, or success, simply by being alive. This is real transformation, not to discard the mask in anger, not to expose oneself publicly, but day by day, to need it less. And one day you realize you can be yourself in company, on stage, and in the eyes of a loved one, not because permission was granted, but because you allowed it. This permission is true freedom. Freedom to be oneself is not a final destination, but a journey. It is neither straight nor smooth. Sometimes it feels like climbing stairs where each step requires release, not effort. Release of image, opinion, label, script. The deeper we allow this, the quieter the outer world, the clearer the inner voice that always knew who we were before we became someone for others. Research on social identity shows a simple yet troubling truth. The more we identify with a social role, the higher our anxiety and the lower our life satisfaction. Psychologist Jonathan Friedman's experiments with people performing roles, from actors to doctors, confirmed that those who merge with their function experience more stress and feel disconnected from their own desires. And a mask is precisely such a role taken to automatism. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, when one forgets that a role is a choice, not essence. He wrote, "The waiter is not a waiter. He plays a waiter. And the more sincerely he plays, the further he is from himself." The paradox is that the better we perform a role, the less we ask who we are without it. Cognitive science confirms that a brain trained for years in repetition cannot distinguish play from truth. If you have portrayed a confident and indispensable person for 20 years, the brain eventually regards this as your true self. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reflection, stops questioning, and the limbic system takes over. Emotional autopilot. We no longer feel authenticity but continue playing because it is easier. One man, a successful businessman, once shared in a therapy group, "I came here not because I am unhappy, but because I feel nothing." This is a frightening but common truth. A mask deprives not only of pain, but of joy. Filtering emotions to hide vulnerability also filters vitality, leaving life flat, cozy, but empty. There is a way back. It does not require radical withdrawal or public revelation. It begins with small, almost imperceptible steps. The first is mindful observation of oneself in social interaction. After meetings with friends, colleagues, or family, ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I say something I did not think? Where did I remain silent, afraid of being misunderstood? Where did I feel tension playing someone else's role? No immediate behavior change is needed. Simply noticing cultivates sensitivity, and that sensitivity changes everything. Observing the mask is already the beginning of freedom. Second, keep a mask journal. For a week, record the roles you played: caring parent, cheerful friend, confident expert, compliant partner. Then note which roles were voluntary, which were out of fear, and which exhausted you. This analysis exposes repeating patterns, which most often lead to burnout, anxiety, and disconnection from self. Third, practice silence regularly. Not meditation or concentration, just silence. A few minutes a day without music, books, conversation, or screens. Simply be. In this silence, the mask begins to crack. The internal dialogue, often painful but truthful, becomes audible. Healing begins here. A neuropsychologist once observed, "The problem is not that we wear masks, but that we forget they are masks." Working with patients who had lost memory, he noticed they lost not only facts, but also roles. They ceased being strong or smart and became sincere. Some began living anew, like children, unconcerned with appearance or judgment. People around them felt extraordinary ease because there was no need to pretend. It is impossible to always be without a mask. Sometimes it protects, sometimes it helps adaptation. But it is a choice, not a sentence. Everyone knows the moment when a mask suffocates. When you want to speak the truth but smile anyway. When you seek understanding in family but play everything is fine. When the mirror reflects a character exhausted by its own role. In these moments, opportunity arises. Not to destroy everything, not to sever ties, not to flee, but simply to say, I feel, I see, I no longer want to hide. Then something incredible happens. We become alive. Complex, vulnerable, mysterious, but authentic. And this authenticity brings genuine intimacy, joy, and meaning. A neuropsychology book recounts an astonishing case of Lauren, a woman who lost the ability to recognize emotions on faces after a severe head injury. Her brain, particularly the amygdala and regions linked to mirror neurons, was temporarily disconnected from social perception. As she later said, those months were her loneliest, but also her most truthful. She could not read faces or guess reactions. She had to be utterly honest. When you cannot hide, all that remains is being, without navigation, without masks. It is frightening but freeing, she admitted. This story confirms a known paradox. Sometimes losing the usual navigation, social roles, external judgment, or even self-confidence, opens the door to deeper, authentic presence. The brain seeks safety, disliking uncertainty and chaos. Masks provide an illusion of stability. We know how to behave, are predictable, and anxiety diminishes. Yet this comes at the cost of distancing from authenticity. Safety and aliveness are often antagonists, and true freedom, as Erich Fromm wrote, requires liberation from both external and internal constraints. Fromm spoke of the escape from freedom, how people choose unfreedom rather than confront the unsettling void within. Masks are precisely this escape. They create a character while hiding the person. As long as we identify with them, we live others' lives, often unconsciously. Yet the path to self does not require revolution. It requires honesty and willingness to be in the process. To live means to change, doubt, and err. The mask fears this, the person does not. A Japanese calligraphy master once told his student, "True beauty lies in not knowing what the next stroke will be. This is the key to authentic being. Let go of control. Accept imperfection. Release the habitual. It may seem that without a mask, we will be rejected or lonely. In reality, it is the opposite. Only by shedding the mask do we see those around us as people, not roles or statuses. Only then can true closeness emerge. Removing the mask is not a performance but a process. Sometimes painful, sometimes subtle. A gentle internal yes to oneself. When someone asks, "How are you?" you answer not fine, but not simply. And someone nods, recognizing themselves in you. The world does not need another perfect smile. It needs authentic people who dare to be real, inspiring others by example. Honesty, not image, creates trust. This is the beginning of real change. Not slogans or facades, but deep, quiet work on oneself. Try this. Next time you feel a mask, do not judge yourself. Pause and ask, what am I hiding? Sometimes one honest glance inward reveals more than years of outward performance. A mask can protect, but only truth heals. Only by accepting our fragility do we regain strength, the kind that does not shout, oppress, or seek approval, but simply exists. Like light that needs no permission to shine. Perhaps this is the essence. We do not come into this world to perform, but to become. Every yes to oneself is a step in that direction. If this path resonates, follow it gently, with observation and self-respect, without rush. Masks will fall. What remains will be real, and this is the most precious thing to carry into the future. If you found this story meaningful, consider subscribing to Grounded in Science for more explorations of the mind. Share this video with someone you care about, and leave your reflections in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts.